Welcome to Just an Average Citizen, the podcast that helps to educate, inform, and empower you to make an impact in Abilene and the Big Country. Welcome to another podcast. We've got a lot of exciting things to talk about, I think, and I just am so excited you've chosen to join me this week for this podcast about what's going on in our city. It would really be helpful if you could subscribe and share this podcast with your friends and family, because that way people can start to see that there is an option for understanding what's going on in our city. There are currently things available that help us learn about what's happening in our city, but they're not easily accessible. And if you don't have a grid to understand them, it can be very overwhelming and confusing. For example, there are several Facebook pages, if you're on Facebook, and I think even Instagram. There's just the City of Abilene social media. There's the Parks and Recreation Department of Abilene. I think there may be a water. There may be another, I don't know. There's like 4 or 5 different accounts that to follow all of them can be very confusing because you got to look at them all. And sometimes the algorithms really don't put those out for you to see them. So I'm hoping this will help you know where to start and what to look for so that you can be educated. Because of the way our government is set up, it is meant to be transparent. The problem is sometimes the transparency is very detail oriented and you can get lost in the weeds. But I want to let you know, have no fear. I have some good news to share with you. We do make a difference. We do have an impact, and that has been what's been communicated to me, but I haven't found exactly the best way to approach that. As I talked to you about this last city council meeting that I attended, I brought up to I asked Councilman Yates to pull the consent agenda item, which you're free to email any of the council members and ask them to pull a consent agenda item. And basically what the consent agenda item is like, hey, we've already discussed this. This is really routine. We know what's going on. So we're just going to go through the motions because there's really not a lot to talk about. And I think the most part, that works really well. However, there are some items that I think would be helpful for the city manager or the council. I guess the council approves what's on the consent agenda but if we would put some of those things on the regular agenda where the citizens would have access just to be able to see it, I think would be very helpful. But one of the things I have found is people are really confused about what's going on the streets. They're complaining about them, what project, what order, and there is a method to the madness. In fact, having watched the Street Maintenance Advisory and Appeals Board meetings for the last 2 years, or the last 2, 8 meeting cycles, it's very informative, but many people don't even know to look at that advisory board meeting because they don't understand that there is actually a format on how they gauge which streets need to be done first and which streets need to be done next. And contrary to our understanding, working on streets that aren't in bad shape are actually better and cheaper to maintain than to go in and rehaul the really bad ones. So it can feel like they're focusing on the better streets instead of the worst ones, but there is a method to the madness, and it's helpful for us to understand those things. So here I am speaking to them about how it's confusing, and I really wish they would do some things to bring it to light. Actually, I forgot I talked several times. But what I really wanted to talk to you about was this one. The last podcast, I told you about the time that I spoke up and talked about how hard it is to get information from some of the city staff, and it's very confusing. And City Manager Robert Hanna was like, well, if I don't know what's going on, I can't fix the problem. And I was like, well, let's see what happens, because I didn't really know if he meant that he wanted to fix the problem, because to my knowledge, other people had experienced this as well. And so I felt like if I had another chance to communicate my desires or my intentions, then maybe things would go better. So I ended up emailing him, and he clarified for me that yes, it is important that city staff understand that they're supposed to share freely a public display items that have already been shared with the public. That's not an issue that requires waiting 10 business days through the public information request process. And so that was really encouraging to me. I was already excited. I was like, okay, great. That means that there's going to be a shift. That means that there was a back and forth and it went well. And I was very excited about that. And then I get ready because, we know that the agenda packet comes out for the city council meeting typically on Fridays. And so I checked that and I noticed that, goodness gracious, looky here. Okay, so as I was looking on the agenda packet, I noticed that, or on the agenda item, actually, I was just looking through to see what was going to be on this council meeting. I was so excited because I never expected this to happen. As I was looking through the agenda packet, what I did was come to the agenda minutes link for the city council meeting on Thursday. And, you can look at the agenda. And what's great about that is you can find the actual item you want to look up so you can know what number it is. Because if you don't want to go through, like for this example, this week is 691 pages. Holy smokes, I've never seen so many pages. And I think I can explain why it's so many pages, but I can come down here because I know it's item number 21. And I can just come here and talk about this. Okay, guys? This is actually pretty impressive to me. Now, again, I don't necessarily have anything to compare it to, but I mentioned it at a council meeting 2 weeks ago. I had an email exchange back with the city manager who was very polite and responded to me. And now it's on the agenda for the consent agenda. So it's not going to be announced. It's not going to be discussed, but they are going to revise and amend the Resolution 200 2019 to make sure that it's clarified that if something has already been made public or it was failed to be attached to a public item like the agenda packet, then you don't have to go through the public information quest. I just want to say this feels huge to me because, again, we have to build a rapport and relationship with our elected officials and our government employees, and be able to do that when we can start having some healthy discussions. And so will that happen every time? No, but guess what? For all the times it hasn't happened, it happened this time, and I'm pretty excited. I do want to also point out, because it won't be covered in the meeting, is there are quite a few street projects that are going to be approved, and there's going to be a resolution to approve contracts for those. So I wanted to show you them really quickly. And again, I'm just going to come down here and look at the quick links. So we have, for example, this one. Let's see here. They have a presentation slide. So this is what they're going to show you for council meetings. They have the North 18th Street rehab. They are going to, let's see, I can zoom in here because it's a side slide. They advertise this on August 11th, August 18th, and then they've opened bids on August 27th, and they have an allowance of $100,000, which is to cover, I guess, incidentals or things like that. Not really sure, but they awarded the bid to J.H. Strain and Sons for $1.2 million. So there's several of these street projects in here that I thought was really important. South 7th, they're going to be doing that one. And again, I think this would be great because, again, they're talking about doing the streets. And sometimes they get to come out. This one's for the South 7th reconstruction project. It's $1.1 million. So if those are streets you have looking for, and then I think that's it. There might be a third one, but you get the point. So I think also they have on here the Abilene firehouse construction. And so again, these are all in here for you to see. On September 10th, they got bids. Tyner won the bid at $7.08 million. It's coming from a FY22 bond, which is interesting. That's right. Yeah, because we voted on that in fiscal year 2022. And they're going to enter construction with Tyner for this new firehouse, which they approved. We voters approved on it 2 years ago. So now you see some of the things on the consent agenda item. But like a lot of this is, I get why they don't include it. The minutes are there. So if you miss the meeting and you don't have time to watch a video and you'd rather read them, they're all there. But they're not all there. So like anytime someone makes a public comment, it's very limited. It just says the person's name, which to me feels like a lost opportunity. So the other thing, which I was trying to point out earlier, is I did mention how it's hard to know what's going on with the street projects. And again, I think the response was, wow, we probably should do a better job of improving our communication. So I just want you to know, since we met, since the last council meeting this last week, it has come to my attention that there is, I have the sound. So let's see here. Here is one video talking about the different projects, one reel on the City of Abilene page. Here is, let me show you, here is a picture talking about how they discover which street they're going to choose by the pavement condition index map. And then let's look here. And then we have one more, I think it's a video to show you. Yep, there it is. Oh, wait, nope, that's the old one. Sorry, I got a little excited and confused. Let me come back here. 3. Yeah, there's another one. Okay. So since our last meeting, there was 3 additional street discussions happening on the social media page. So again, I think that's a win. I think they're trying, and I want to shout out kudos. I even commented on one of the things saying, good job, keep it coming. We love the information. So I just want to let you know that it's taken a while, but I'm starting to see that there are ways that you can be heard in a more effective manner. Now, I'm sure I've tried all the wrong ones first, so that's why it's taking so long. But now I'm letting you know there is a way to do it, and you don't have to make my mistakes. You can do the things that work best as soon as you know about that. Okay, so that is all of the videos I'm going to show you. But one of the things I did want to talk to you about is just the importance of recognizing that we can approach things in our city with a certain perspective, and it really can mess us up. But if we understand the right perspective, then we really can find greater joy in the process. So I was looking at a lot of just different information because, I'm trying to do research, trying to understand, trying to make sure I have the facts before I ask questions or before I present issues that I've noticed. And I noticed in one of the elections, there was something, it was a municipal election, and somebody won their seat by about 60 votes. 60 votes in our city. That's a huge number. That's a huge number in the sense that if we just had, if 60 people hadn't showed up, it would have been a tie and I know that was probably a runoff, but I just want you to understand that there are some tight races. And one of the objects or one of the ideas that I would really like to explore and have discussion about is, why do we hold municipal elections in May? The voter turnout is dismal. I mean, we're talking like 4,000 to 8,000 people show up for a municipal election in the city. And municipal is just the city elections. So basically we just have city council. We might have a school board election. There's no really good turnout. But when we're talking in terms of November, we're talking upwards of 25,000 people. So while those numbers still aren't great, it's a whole heck of a lot better. So to me, it makes sense. If you want to have a true election that represents the voice of the people, you would do it in November. And I know in 2020, they had to do it in November because of COVID, but I just think that makes smart sense. And then we're not hosting an election that costs the city and the taxpayers money. And we're giving time to transition and move into things, because the fiscal year, typically for school boards, it starts in September. For the city, it starts in September, October. So it just makes sense to me to start having that conversation. And as we continue to be able to engage with the council members and just the people who work for the city, I think we're going to be able to start having more important discussions and just being able to give our feedback. Because again, like I said, if someone can almost have a tie within terms of 60 votes, that's really close, and it's not everyone showing up. And so if we understand that we should never ask if we're going to vote, we just know we're going to vote. And knowing who to vote for is important. We don't want to always just vote for somebody that we like. I know in the primaries, there was a lot of talk and discussion of that the candidate is a good person, vote for him. That is the worst decision you could make. That is like, it doesn't matter if it's a good person. I've been preparing for teaching a class on civics to students. And one of the things I've realized, or maybe even someone helped me realize through the different materials I've been looking at, is that our founders knew that men were there's still an element to every person has a bent for evil. And when people get power, you can tend to make worse choices than, say, if you didn't have power. And so you think you're going to go into this and go, man, I'm going to stand for what's right. I'm going to do the right thing. And then you get in the position, you're like, wow, I really like the perks of this. I like the ability I have to do things and this and that. And it doesn't even have to be bad reasons, but you decide that you like that position more than you like your original intent, which is to serve the people. And you can start making decisions that can put you in that place where you get to stay there rather than doing the job that you were elected to do. And that can be scary. And our founders knew that. So they wanted to have checks and balances. And so we don't want to decide to vote on people who are good. We want to decide on people who, can they do the job? Do they have a faith in God? Because people who have faith in God typically will have somebody to answer to. Men who have no faith whatsoever in God really have no one to hold them accountable. And so that's a really good point. And then also, will they get the job done, right? And so I think those are two. I repeated one, and that's just off the top of my head. But we just need to have the ability to recognize we're looking for people to do a job. We're not looking for our favorite person. We're not looking for people who always make us happy. We're looking for people who said, I'm going to do the job, and that you know that you can count on them to follow through. And so in this election season, I know we are in a particular part of Texas that necessarily doesn't feel like we have a huge voice, but I would love if we could get more people turning out to the polls to show that we do have a voice, because we want people to know who we want to be elected. And I think November 5th is going to be a big deal in our nation. And I hope that you will show up to the polls. A lot of people in Abilene, most of them actually vote within the first day or two of early voting. And then there's a surge on election day, but most people have already decided in early voting. And, there was a season where we were like, wait till the day of, but actually, because of all the hiccups and problems, it's actually better to get your vote in now. Get it in early. And so early voting starts on October 21st. And I'm going to wrap up with this. One of the most amazing jobs that I can recommend that you do in terms of election, or in terms of being a part of the election, is to be a poll worker. And, we need people to work at the polls. And so the election department or the elections office is always looking for people to work the polls. And so it's really important. You can get paid for it, and it's not a bad paycheck because you're working a significant portion of the day, but also B, you understand the process. So if I can encourage you to start thinking about being a poll worker once, maybe you'll like it and do it again. And plus, it's really fun to be able to see all the different people in our community, but really, you will have a greater appreciation for how the system works. And that's one of the things we in the Abilene area have lost our appreciation of, is how it works and why we do what we do. We've trusted on others to tell us what to do for a long time, that our muscles have gotten kind of weak and not really, they don't give us the ability to do much. So we've got to start exercising our muscles of being responsible for knowing what's going on, being responsible for knowing who's running, being responsible for knowing when elections are, and then also not just voting, because that's the most basic thing, showing up to help with the polls by working them, by watching them, and also showing up to open meetings, whether it's a council meeting or a board meeting or a survey about the lake or just an opportunity to meet an elected official. Like we had an elected official or a candidate running for an office on the ballot this November, came to town on Saturday, and showing up to those events help us to start understanding the process a little bit better, because we get to be around people who have been doing that a lot longer than us, and that's a good thing. Plus, it's really good to be able to know that you're using your voice to have a say, rather than just going, well, I'll just trust the process and see what happens. Well, the process doesn't work if you don't show up. There is no process if we don't show up, because our nation, our states, and our cities were set up to be governed by the consent of the people. And that, it doesn't work if we don't show up. So I just want to let you know that it's been kind of a fun week, just getting to see that there can be some positive changes that come. And I think this is the start of something great, because again, when we are coming with the agenda of making things better and not trying to tear people down, then building relationships and trying to figure out how to work together with people that maybe we don't have a lot in common with, or maybe we've not really known them much in our circles in the city. It doesn't matter. We all need to work together. And I think there's some good potential for some things to come in the future if we continue to do that and reinvigorate each other to be present, show up, and know what's going on, so that you're not frustrated over things that we really don't need to be frustrated on, and deal with the problems that we really need to deal with. So I think there's some good ideas that are going to come down the pike. I'm excited for the process of learning and growing and being able to share these ideas with people. So one way you can help get that process done a lot faster is by sharing this podcast with your friends and family after you subscribe. It's a really good way, because word of mouth is the best way to get stuff going, because algorithms, and I'm not that social media savvy to get people to start paying attention to what is going on, but I do know there's interest in knowing what is going on. So thank you for being a part of this podcast. So I hope today you've been a little bit more encouraged. You've been a little bit more, I keep saying encouraged. I guess that needs to be added, but not today. I really hope you've been a little more educated, a little more informed, and a little more empowered to make an impact in Abilene and the big country. Until next time.